Hello and welcome to the Allplane Podcast, where we explore different aspects of the aviation industry in the company of professionals. As always, I start with a reminder that you can find these and other preceding episodes of the Allplane Podcast, as well as many other interesting stories about airlines and commercial aviation on our website, Allplane.tv. I repeat, this is Allplane.tv. Today's guest is Rob Ceravolo, the founder and CEO of Tropic Ocean Airways. Rob's story sounds to me like the quintessential all-American journey, from a Top Gun US Navy pilot flying F-14s out of an aircraft carrier to becoming a successful entrepreneur. After leaving the Navy, Rob invested literally everything he had in the creation of a new airline in Florida that is called Tropic Ocean Airways. What's special about it? It's a seaplane-only airline. Tropic Ocean Airways currently operates a fleet of 13 Cessna amphibious aircraft from bases in Fort Lauderdale, San Juan, and Antigua. And it also provides seasonal services between New York and the Hamptons. Last year, it carried more than 45,000 people, almost a third of them on regular flights. We could say that Rob is a sort of seaplane evangelist. You will see what this means when you hear him talking about seaplanes. Because in this episode, we not only talk about Tropic Ocean Airways and Rob's entrepreneurial journey, but also, and more generally, about the pros and cons of seaplanes and the role they can play in the future of the aviation industry. But perhaps best is that, without further ado, we metaphorically take a dip into the water and welcome our guest today. Hi Rob, how are you?
Good. How are you, Mikhail?
Very well. So you are joining us from South Florida, right?
Yeah. I'm in Fort Lauderdale.
Okay,
I'm in Fort Lauderdale, yeah.
So that's where your airline is based. We're going to explain a little bit more about the airline you founded and you manage, which is called Tropic Ocean Airways. And it's based in near Fort Lauderdale, right?
Yeah, we're actually based at the Fort Lauderdale International Airport, the main airport there in Fort Lauderdale. And we also have a co-base in Miami. The Miami Seaplane base, yeah.
I have to tell the audience that actually a little bit about the context where we met. We were both speaking at a conference in the Caribbean, in the beautiful island of St. Martin. We were hosted by a friend of us called Bart Slabart that organizes the Caribabia conference, also known as the Caribbean Aviation Summit. And I remember very well your presentation because it was really an amazing delivery, and you told us about your airline, of course, but also about your previous life as a fighter pilot in the US Navy, about the sort of things that you learned in the military that help you perhaps become a better entrepreneur and a successful manager later on. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and as I was saying, your experience in the Navy and how you started the Tropic Ocean Airways?
Yeah, thanks. And by the way, that was, such a great conference, and it was sad to see it, obviously get canceled this year. So I'm looking forward to heading back to St. Martin next year, as I'm sure we all are. So,
yes.
So I started the company in 2009 when I was actually in the Navy. So my background, I was actually a Navy fighter pilot. I flew the F-14 Tomcat, deployed on that with a jet twice. We retired that jet in 2006. If you're familiar, obviously, with the movie Top Gun, you probably heard of it, with Tom Cruise.
Of course,
the F-14 is one of the sexiest, jet fighters that, in history. And it's a legendary airplane. And I was very fortunate to fly it. In fact, that was my dream plane when I was growing up. So when I selected jets at a Navy flight school, they said, hey, put your top 3 choices of aircraft. And I wrote F-14 3 times because I really wanted to fly that thing. So we retired that jet in 2006. I transitioned to the F-18 Super Hornet, which was something else. The F-14 was kind of an archaic platform, older technology, whereas the Super Hornet was all brand new. The airplanes that my squadron had they still had the new car smell. They were straight from the factory. Just an amazing piece of machinery. A better airplane in terms of systems, but the F-14 was just a hell of a lot more fun to fly, right? From a pilot's perspective. Yeah. And then from there I transitioned to the F-5, which is the Tiger II. We use it to simulate adversaries. So we simulate the MiG-21, the F-5.
Yeah, rather old airplane, right? The F5.
Yeah, those airplanes are older than I am, and so you go from flying the F-18, which is quadruple computer systems and everything else, to this old F5 where you're going back to hand flying and teaching dogfighting is what I did. So I was an air combat instructor. Went through Top Gun in 2009, actually, which is a dream of mine. Graduated Top Gun, and I would teach air combat. And flying that airplane was hand flying. It was back to the old days of flying where you really had a feel. You would feel the aircraft buffet, in your hand, and you'd feel it in the seat of your pants. It was seat of the pants flying. It was a lot of fun. But around that time, I really started thinking about, my career. And at 10 years in the Navy, you have a choice. You could sign on for another 4 years. So you have to give them a minimum 10 years as a pilot, or you could get out, and most guys and girls will stay in another 4 years, get a nice bonus. And then at that point, they may get to go to the airlines, or they'll stay to retirement. I decided to get out the 10-year mark and start a company, which was something I've dreamed about since I was a kid. I always wanted to get involved in aviation. So I was actually stationed in Key West, Florida. And I had this passion for seaplanes growing up, and the idea of being, around the water and being up in airplanes. By the way, it's the reason I joined the Navy and not the Air Force, because I could fly off ships, right? Yeah. And combining the two with seaplanes, it's just such a beautiful machine the seaplane is, and it really brings you back to that, romance of flying and things like that. So I had this passion for it. So I started the company down there, this little 4C206. I'd gotten out of the Navy, became a Navy reservist. Took us about a year and a half to get the company up and running and get certified. And at that time, I had sold everything I had. I hired my first employee, who's now our COO of the company, Nick Veltri, who's just a phenomenal seaplane pilot. And Nick and I, launched this company on very little money. I rode a bicycle to work because I sold my car to try to pay for parts on the airplane. I really sold everything I had, my house, everything else. And we had this little 4-seat airplane, and we launched in 2011. It took about a year and a half to get certified. And we had this one airplane. We moved to Fort Lauderdale, and we really started flying between Fort Lauderdale and the Bahamas. Uh-huh. And it's an amphibious airplane, right? So we launched out of Fort Lauderdale International, take people over to Bimini, which is a close island. We take people to different places. And, we didn't really have much.
Can I stop you 1 second here? You mentioned
absolutely.
An amphibious airplane. Is it different from a seaplane, or they are synonymous?
Yeah. We like to draw the distinction, right? So a seaplane is a float plane, right? So we operate seaplanes that are amphibious, meaning the wheels come out of the floats. Mm-hmm. So you can fly, think about, the versatility of this thing, right? Water to water, land to water, water to land, whatever. So, and that to me, people have asked me, like, why don't you fly straight float seaplanes? It's cheaper to operate. You actually have much bigger margins on float planes than you do in the amphib world because of maintenance. And honestly, where we fly in the places we fly, we like to have that, I say that the variability of operation, really opens up the market for us and gives us also a level of safety where, hey, if I can't get into a location because the weather's bad, or the sea state's up, I'm not going to push it. I'm going to go to the nearest airport, right, and take you there instead and divert.
So a pure seaplane has to stay in the water all the time.
That's correct.
An amphibious plane can alternate between the water, but it can also land on a normal runway.
Yep, that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and from a maintenance perspective, we get the airplanes out of the water at night too, so they're not floating at night, right, in the salt water. So we take them out of the water; they're on land, right, and we wash them down and everything else. So the amphib to us is just it's the solution, I think, to a lot of airlift problems where we operate in.
Mm-hmm. But sorry, I interrupted you when you were about to explain your first operation. So you launched with flights from Fort Lauderdale to Bimini in the Bahamas, and then you grew the company from there, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of neat. We were the first. So if you're familiar with the history of seaplanes in South Florida, there's a company called Chalks, which had a fatal crash, unfortunately, in 2005. And South Florida and the Bahamas had not seen seaplanes since. There was no operation out of the Miami seaplane base where we fly out of, which is a really cool, iconic place in downtown Miami, right? Where if you remember the old TV show Miami Vice, there's always this
I've been in Miami, and I actually have family living there, but it's been like a long time I haven't been there. But I remember a little bit the place. So then that was which year? How long was it?
So that's 2011. So we brought commercial seaplane service back between Florida and Miami, or Florida rather, the Bahamas in 2011.
After
We
a
launched
6-year
it.
hiatus between
6-year hiatus, exactly. Yep.
Okay.
And then from there, we grew very organically initially. We people thought we had a fleet of these things, so I would take the one seaplane, I'd fly it everywhere at a huge loss, and we were like, how many 206s do you have? I'm like, I've got a bunch, and we only had one, but that drew the interest of a couple of partners. So we brought in a couple of investors in 2014. We worked closely with Whip Air, who makes the floats, and Textron, which makes the aircraft, to upgrade to the new Caravan EX, which is the factory new airplane that's 4 feet longer and bigger, and all intents and purposes, just an amazing amphibious aircraft. And we added the EX and basically brought our entire fleet up to EXs, and we grew between 2014 and 2019, right? 2020, I think COVID is obviously an impact, but pre-COVID levels, we went from 206 to 13 aircraft, 12 of which are Caravan EX aircraft, 10 of which are on floats. At the beginning of 2020, we went from 2 employees to 107 employees. We went from one location to we fly into 8 different countries. We're based in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, as you know. We're also based up in New York seasonally, so we have aircraft up in New York that fly out to the Hamptons out of the city. We have a base in Puerto Rico and San Juan, and we have a base down in Antigua. And we're launching additional bases actually coming into 2021. So we grew pretty rapidly, and we did it, which I'm very proud of. We did it while maintaining quality. So if you go to, our Facebook page, for example, in 2019, we flew 45,000 people, and TripAdvisor and Facebook, we still maintain 5-star reviews.
How many people fit in your planes?
8. 8. Yeah, in the seaplane. So,
and what's your profile of passenger? Is it leisure passengers? I guess most of them.
Yeah, So it's mostly leisure, right? I mean, if you look at the New York market, you get the business traveler who spends the weekends in the Hamptons, right?
Yeah.
And you get some level of business where we are in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, but most of it is leisure, right? And in our customer profile, I like to say that if you think of like a bell curve, right? On the low end, you've got the $250 seat that we sell by the seat. We do have some scheduled service, right, from Fort Lauderdale to Bimini. On the high end, you've got, the family that charters a $150,000 yacht, right, for the week, and we fly them direct to the yacht, and maybe, and that's the high end. And then you have like that big bell curve in the middle, which is what we call like the mass affluent, right? The middle class, upper middle class that goes on vacation, charters the airplane with their family, and spends 4 or 5 days in the Bahamas or elsewhere, a resort in the BVI.
And how much do your tickets cost on average? For example, let's say I'm going on a high season, just midweek, one single ticket.
Yeah, so we have, obviously we sell, so about 30% of our business is scheduled service, meaning you could buy a ticket, right? So if you want to go to Bimini, it's $250 one way or $500 round trip, right?
So it's a set fare. It's $250 is a standard fare?
Right, correct.
Okay,
correct.
For one way from
one way.
Okay.
And then we have the charter market, right? Okay. And the charter, it varies on where you go. We charge by the hour based on the region we're in, So, and that varies, right? So a flight from Puerto Rico to the BVI might be around $3,500 for 8 people, and that's an aircraft charter. Yep.
And all your bases do regular flights, so that's only from Florida to Bahamas. Also, in Puerto Rico and Antigua, you said you also have a base. You also
but right now we're charter only because we had just launched that at the end of last year. Yeah, and we're going to grow into scheduled service in different regions. Right now, the way we enter a region usually is by charter. To kind of build a demand base essentially, and then we'll bring in scheduled service as the demand increases.
Mm-hmm. And in New York, is it summer service? I guess.
Summer. We're up there between May and September usually. And predominantly up there in partnership with Blade. Obviously, COVID is a little bit different, but normally we go up there. We fly for a company called Blade, which is an app. They're a broker, and they have we're one of 2 now seaplane operators they utilize, the largest.
Yeah, I knew about Blade. They are pretty strong in helicopters. Is it right?
So they started in helicopters, and they got into the seaplane business because you can always operate a seaplane. So taking a step back, right? If you think about the places that we Tropic operates in, we look for regions that struggle with airlift. So maybe it's an archipelago like the Bahamas where you don't have a runway everywhere, or maybe it's an urban area like New York City, right? So a helicopter is a great solution to these hard to reach places, but it's an expensive solution, right? You can always, the seaplanes like that middle of the road, it's obviously more expensive to operate than a land aircraft, but it's more versatile than a land aircraft. It's not as versatile as a helicopter, but it's much less money to operate in terms of cost. And you could carry more people with more weight at a faster speed. So your cost per mile is obviously significantly lower. So the seaplane is a great alternative to the helicopter in a lot of locations.
So would you say helicopters are your main competitor, or what are your other competitors? I guess in the Hamptons, you're competing with land transport. You're competing with helicopters for the kind of
correct. So you got the helicopters, you've got the land transport. So land transport is obviously the cheapest, right? And it takes 3.5 hours on a Friday. The helicopters are the most expensive. And if you have more than 4 people and you have a lot of bags, you're not going to do it. So again, I think the seaplane is like that middle of the road. It's at the right price point, it's the right speed and a great capability. It's a 35-minute flight, and you could take 8 people in all of their bags.
Yeah. And what about the Caribbean? Are you competing there with the traditional, the regular airlines, or you are not really competing because you are maybe going, you're doing routes that are not really doable with a large?
Correct. Yeah. So we don't like to enter markets where you're competing with like Delta, right? So that's just not, or even Cape Air, for example, right? So we like to look at areas that are, again, difficult to get to. And we find a great solution for airlift, and we put it in there, and we find the right price point, which makes sense for whoever we're going to partner with down there. And so, a great example is the BVI, right? So if you want to go to a place called Oil Nut Bay, which is in Virgin Gorda in the British Virgin Islands.
I must say here, just to parenthesis here, it's the BVI is the British Virgin Islands, right?
Yep, correct.
Yeah, just for the people that aren't familiar with the Caribbean.
No problem. No problem. So if you're trying to go to the Oil Nut Bay, right, which is a nice resort there in Virgin Gorda in the British Virgin Islands, you'll connect through San Juan if you're coming from the U.S. If you're coming from Europe, you'll connect most likely in Antigua or St. Martin. So let's just say you're coming from the U.S. So you connect in San Juan, you fly commercial to San Juan. You get a 2 or 3 hour connection, and you fly, like Cape Air, for example, 402, which will take you into Road Town or Tortola, which is the main island in the British Virgin Islands. From there, you take a taxi to a ferry, and then you take a ferry over to North Sound, and then you take another taxi over to, where you're going, right? Yeah. Well, what we do is we pick you up in San Juan, and we fly you direct to the resort. Yeah. So we'll shave off about 3 or 4 hours of travel, essentially. And that's our value proposition. It's the fact that we'll get you there a lot quicker. It's usually a better experience. Our airplanes are factory new, as I mentioned. We are IFR capable, which means we're all weather capable. We have we're very big on customer service, so the overall experience is better. But really, what you're getting is you're getting time. So if you're going somewhere on vacation, to get 4 hours back of your first day on vacation, it's a big deal. And you arrive and you just have a better experience.
And the experience is awesome. I remember I tried one of your planes in St. Martin. We flew to San Eustatius, I think, so one of the nearby islands. It was really cool.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
We didn't land on the water, but it was still like really, really an amazing experience. So it really sounds like you provide lots of value in these markets where you fly to. And tell me about what are the advantages and also the disadvantages of flying a fleet of seaplanes, not just from the passenger point of view, but also from an operational point of view, because I think the history of commercial aviation started with seaplanes pretty much. I mean, you look at the pioneers, the Pan American, and all these guys flying across the ocean. They were all flying seaplanes, and at some point,
they were.
Yeah, at some point they fell out of favor. Actually, there's a book I recommend, which is the biography of Juan Tripe. I don't know how you.
Juan Tripe. Yeah. Okay.
Tripe. Yeah. Yep. That's a really, really interesting book about the beginnings of Pan American, and
such an amazing story.
Yeah, I will add a link in the show notes. But just going back to the topic, why seaplanes at some point they fell out of favor and they kind of became confined to very niche markets, places like Alaska, the Caribbean, the Maldives, like that.
So Yeah, the as aviation moved towards that longer range, higher altitude, higher speed, it's really you can't really, I would say, integrate seaplane operations into the jet, right? Into the jet world, you just cannot, right?
Yeah.
So seaplanes still could have been a viable option for shorter range, but the aviation industry kind of went towards let's build more runways. So if you look at the Bahamas, there's runways all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And the reason is because, seaplanes are extremely high, high cost to maintain. There's at the time, seaplanes there's higher risk associated, not even at the time, even now, there's higher risk associated with seaplane operations, right?
Right.
So, why? Well, number one, obviously maintenance. So if you're not taking good care of the airplanes, look at what happened to chocks, right? Wing came off. There's corrosion's a big deal. It's a very dynamic environment. So landing on a runway in a crosswind, you've done that a million times, right? Every time you touch down in the water, it's a different landing. The sea state might be different. There might be debris in the water. There might be boat traffic. There might be a freaking alligator in your way, which happened up in Central Florida. There's and sea states and winds and everything else. So it's a very, very dynamic environment. So it really became regulated to just to your point, the niche markets, the bush pilots, and stuff like that. When he came in 2011 into the market, it was still very niche, and I'm not going to say, Maldives is different. Maldives standardized the big airline, right? And then you've got Kenmore, which is Seattle, which has been doing it for a long time.
Those are the guys. Sorry, those are the guys that tried the electric seaplane.
Oh, actually, no. Harbor Air did.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
I'll tell you a story about that because I'm a big believer in this.
Actually, that's a topic I want to touch later.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love it. I actually went and visited that airplane. So when we came in 2011, especially in the markets where we were, right? So New York City, the Bahamas, and everybody said, look, seaplanes are really dangerous and it's really challenging, and you have to find these. There's only like a few pilots around that can really fly seaplanes safely. I was literally told this all the time. And I said, why is that? Oh, there's only a few pilots that know how to land in New York City. I said, why? And I said, look, my background, I flew off of aircraft carriers. Think about the most challenging thing in aviation. It's space flight, okay? The second most challenging thing is flying off of aircraft carriers. It is. And yet we do it safely day in and day out. Why? Because we train and develop. So I said, why can't we create a training and development program to create more seaplane pilots and a better seaplane pilot? So we did that, and it was very unpopular in the industry at the time. I got called a lot of names on social media. It's actually hilarious. Most of those things have been deleted.
Why?
But I said because I was upsetting the apple cart.
Okay.
I was upsetting the apple cart when people said, imagine if you are one of the 5 seaplane pilots that everybody said you're the only person who knows how to do this. And I came in and said, I can make 10 of you through good training. It upset some people, right? But the majority of people, understood it and appreciated it. If you remember the speech I gave down in St. Martin, it was actually about professionalizing and standardization, right?
Yes.
And that's what we did. So we took this high risk, there's only 5 people who know how to do a thing, and standardized it and scaled it. Yeah. And we created a training program, and we developed pilots from the ground up.
Yeah, I still remember you mentioned that anecdote about you are told how exactly you should pick up your bottle of water when you are flying, right? Because then you didn't need to think about the So
you don't think about the small things, and you just focus on the fact that maybe the sea state's a little different, and the idea that everybody flies the airplane different. Well, there's a right way and a wrong way, and you cannot standardize everything. You cannot train to every scenario. So you try to train to 50-60% of the scenarios, so you can focus on the things that are dynamic. And seaplane flying is extremely dynamic. So we've proven, like I said, we flew 6,000 flights last year without incident in New York City. We landed the first kind of neat anecdote. We landed the first seaplane in Cuban waters in 60 years.
Wow.
We landed the first seaplane in Roadtown Harbor in the BVI since the 1980s. We have all of these firsts because we were able to really take that, quote unquote, high risk endeavor and mitigate the risk through good training and good pilot development. Mm-hmm. And then you move into the maintenance piece. And you mentioned earlier, it's if you're not taking care of these airplanes, they corrode, which is A, dangerous, B, high cost. So we created a maintenance program. I remember when we first started, Nick and I were, it was just the two of us, and we took 5 glasses of salt water with dissimilar metal, and we had different products we were testing in these glasses of salt water to see which product we were going to settle on. And we settled on a few products. And to this day, I mean, we operate these airplanes day in and day out in salt water, and they look fantastic. We just did 3 hot sections, which is where you do the inspections on the interior of the engines. And the engine manufacturer came back and said, your engines are cleaner than some of the land aircraft we see. So to give you an idea of how we have such a great maintenance team, led by a guy by the name of Steve Lopez. He runs an amazing maintenance team. You guys work day and night on these airplanes, and they do such a good job.
So the difference between different types of salt water is because of the salt content in the water, or the chemical composition?
No. So we did this experiment where we had 5 glasses of the same salt water, but we tested different corrosion proofing products. So we had basically a nut and a bolt. We had a control, which is just salt, right? Salt water. Then the second one was, one product. And we basically had 4 different products plus the one control. And we tested which one would prevent corrosion the best, and that's how we settled on certain products. We took some, I owned a boat a long time ago. So I took some, lessons learned from running a boat, and we started using a product called Salt Away and all this other stuff. And again, it's a lot of work. It's more work than, operating a land aircraft, but through good maintenance practices, it reduces the risk and it brings the cost down as well, long term.
Yeah. I remember talking with some of the pilots there in St. Martin, and they told me, I don't remember the exact number, but that for each hour that the plane, not each hour, but each time the plane touches water, like seawater, you need to do, I don't remember how many hours of maintenance and cleaning just to make sure that it's about 2 labor hours. So it's funny, no matter if the airplane flies all day long, right? Or if it literally just takes off, touches the salt water for a second, comes back, you got to do about 2 hours of labor. So obviously, you want to fly the airplane more during the day if you can, to bring the hourly cost down. But we wash the engine, we wash the aircraft. Again, the guys and girls in our maintenance department, they do just a fantastic job keeping these airplanes flying. And so overall, I think, back to the question, I think now you're starting to see around the world, like seaplanes and amphibious operations are being embraced as an answer. Right. Whereas 10 years ago, it wasn't. Right. So, and I like to think that we helped drive that narrative a little bit, where if you're the Bahamas, or you're the British Virgin Islands, or some other area that has challenging airlift problems, right? You could spend 30 to 150 million to build an airport, or you could let an operator come in and pull up to a dock, and you've just created airlift. You've solved the problem with no money out of the government's pocket. Yes, actually, I was thinking about this the other day because I was checking where in the world the seaplanes and amphibious planes are common, and it's not so many places. You have places like Alaska, the Pacific Northwest, the Caribbean, of course, where you're based. Then places like the Maldives and some resort islands in the tropics, and in Europe. Finally, I realized there's some places in Europe where they are used. In Denmark, there's an airline, I think, that flies between the Danish continental part, the continental part of Denmark, and Copenhagen, which is in an island. And I think there were a couple of attempts to build airlines in Croatia that has many islands and coastal resorts, and in Greece as well. I think in the Mediterranean, it hasn't really consolidated. I don't know what could be the reasons, because to me it looks like an ideal place to run this type of operation, but it hasn't happened yet.
It's a lot of it, unfortunately, is due to red tape. So there's a lot of areas that have tried, and because it's just such a new thing to certain parts of the world. The regulators tend to think it's like going to be dangerous. How are you going to do this? How are you going to land in the ocean next to boats? It becomes like, I've gone through this a million times, and we really have to spend a lot of time demonstrating, showing them how we do risk assessments, showing them how we assess the risk, and it's almost like a partnership with the government to get this thing going. It really is, because if you're going to bring an amphibious operation into a place that hasn't had amphibious operations or seaplanes in years, or never has it, any government official who signs off on that, I mean, I hate to use the term, it's their ass, but it's their ass if they, sign off on an operation that could potentially be dangerous. So there is a lot of red tape involved, I think, in getting it off the ground.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit off the radar for many people. And I guess they have this image of seaplanes as something that they see in the like 1930s and 1940s. So when they see
Yeah.
a seaplane with the propellers and all that, they say, "Oh, wow,
Yeah.
they put me
So,
in a vintage 1940s airplane," which is not really.
yeah, I always joke about that when I walk into a meeting the first time, and I say, "Look, I said, let me guess. Your image of a seaplane is you show up. There's a guy with a beard wearing shorts with a can of oil in his back pocket." I said,
Yeah.
"That's your." He's like, "Yeah, that's exactly." And I said, "Well, look, let me demonstrate. We're like Delta Airlines that lands in the water, and
Hmm.
here's how we or anybody else can do it safely and effectively in your backyard. So it really is trying to change the perception
Hmm.
of seaplanes. And
Yes.
it's a challenge, I mean, and not every operator, or not every seaplane pilot or not every person who's going to operate seaplanes operates to certain, a certain standard, which I think, we all should kind of standardize to a certain level of operation in order to, bring the beauty of seaplanes, what it is, to new locations and do it safely.
Hmm. And also, you cannot land. Well, I don't know if that's the right word. You say it land, or what's the right word for
No, you
for
can
land?
land. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
land in the
you
water.
cannot
So,
land in any. You
yeah.
cannot land on any water, right? I mean, you need
Right.
to have like a secluded place with a
Yep.
pool,
Yeah, but we say
protected area.
protected water. Yeah, you
So
need a
what
certain sea state.
what sort of conditions are there are necessary for your planes to land? You need to have like some port, some enclosure.
Well, I mean, we can land in open water provided the sea state's low, right? So you
Hmm.
look to no more than 1.5 feet of sea state. When we're looking at areas that we want to do regular service in, we usually find a primary and a secondary location. So primary being 80% of the time with prevailing winds, this area is doable, right? And then you always have a secondary backup. And to be honest, there's some areas that, we've gone in and they said, "Can you land a seaplane here?" We said, "No, we could probably do it 40% of the time. And I don't want to promise customers something I can only deliver 40% of the time, right?"
Yeah.
So there's some areas that you just won't be able to get into, but normally we look for protected water. You look for some sort of a clear path to landing and taking off, right? You don't want to land, take off in front of a mountain or a phone tower or something.
Hmm.
Just like you would when you're looking to build an airport. It's kind of the same concept, if you will.
Hmm.
You
And
know,
how do people find you? I mean, are you on the main booking engines? Do you have agreements with mainstream airlines to connect with your flights? Because if I was going, I'm just thinking, if I was going now to the Caribbean, obviously now I know you are there, but if I was just like like first time I go there, it possibly wouldn't cross my mind that there's a seaplane service. So how you do your distribution? I mean, I don't know. You
yeah.
have other channels that you can sell your tickets to a broader audience.
Yeah, I mean, we work a lot with resorts, where the resorts
Mhm.
actually promote us in different areas. We just started, so we're on a certain platform, a booking platform, which doesn't have GDS capability,
Mhm.
unfortunately, but it is now on Kayak. But again, keep in mind that scheduled service is a small part of what we do. So
Mhm.
most of what we do, I think, is through direct marketing, digital marketing, word of mouth, and referral service through the resorts.
You work with brokers as well for the chartering.
We do. Yep, we work with brokers.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
So I mean, you've been growing this company quite amazingly the last few years. So that kind of proves that people, once they try it and they're comfortable with it, they are fine with seaplanes. What future do you see for your segment of the industry as a whole? Do you think that's it's going to keep growing? Obviously, now we have the pandemic thing, which is kind of
Yeah.
unusual. But if we look beyond that, let's assume that the
Yep.
is found for the pandemic in the next few months, or maybe even next couple of years, and things go back to normal. How do you see the seaplane industry evolving from here?
Yeah. It's a good question, and I look at the pandemic as a road, as a bump in the road, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is, we will all get past this. It's tough on the industry. It's tough on all of our industries, right? In terms of travel. But I know we'll get past this. So past the COVID impact, I think seaplanes will be more embraced around the world. I mean, we're working with a company in Thailand right now called Seaplanes, and it's a great group of guys and girls that we're working with on helping them develop the operation, getting approved by the government there. We're talking to, companies in multiple locations around the world. And I think if you look at anywhere around the world where, you named some places too, right? But anywhere around the world where you have either congestion or remote areas like an archipelago, right? That has, a lack of transportation and a body of water nearby, you could bring amphibious service in, to create that route. So I do see and again, as long as it's done correctly, it's done with the right piece of equipment, right? Because some people sometimes bring the wrong seaplane to the party. If it's done properly in terms of how to scale the business with training and operations and stuff like that, I think you can expand amphibious operations around the globe, and solve a lot of the transportation problems with these airplanes.
What about rivers and lakes? Are they very different from operating in the sea?
Yeah, not really. In fact, it's better because it's less corrosion.
Of course.
So what
about rivers? I mean, I guess that if there's a strong current, that can be a challenge sometimes.
Yeah, we have pretty strong current too in some of the locations and some of the harbors we operate in. I think current, just like anything else, the training that goes into creating a seaplane pilot, a lot of it is marine focused. Mm-hmm. How to operate on the water, right? Yeah. Because on the water, we're a boat essentially. So you're dealing with the winds, you're dealing with the currents, you're pulling up the docks, all those things. And that's a part of the training. So, we've operated in 2-3 knot currents. One of our pilots, when our senior captain came from the Amazon, he used to fly missionaries down the Amazon years ago. Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, the river is just another landing area for us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what about what we were mentioning earlier about the electric planes? Because actually the very first commercial flight on an electric plane, as far as I know, was this seaplane. I think it was in Canada, right, near Vancouver.
Yeah. So Harbor Air.
Yeah, Harbor Air. Yeah. So you mentioned you've been involved in this project. You've been following up closely.
Yeah, we know the Harbor Air folks very well. And in fact, I went up and saw that airplane after they flew. It was a Beaver. Right. There's basically a flying battery. The entire fuselage was a battery. So Greg McDougall, who's the founder of the company, actually did the flight. And Harbor Air is one of the few companies out there. I mentioned Kenmore, as well, for example, that are just been around for a very long time and just have they've been flying seaplanes for years, and they do it really well. It's a very, very great company up there. They've expanded rapidly up there, obviously pre-COVID. And they pushed the idea of an electric aircraft. And I think they're very forward thinking. So they flew this flight, and it wasn't really a commercial flight, right? Because there's nobody paid for it. So it's essentially just a pilot on board because it's a flying battery, but they proved that it can be done. And right now we don't have the technology, but we will, I think, in 3 to 4 years to fly airplanes on shorter routes. Right. And by the way, I mean, for seaplanes, it's such a unique idea because, being in a seaplane, for example, if you have the battery that can actually maintain a charge for long enough to do a route without having to pick up fuel, that saves weight if they could get the weight of the batteries down. I mean, there's so many opportunities as the technology advances. Right now, we don't have it. There's no way you can get the weight down to a reasonable level. But eventually, I think, as the batteries get smaller and more efficient, we'll see that opportunity someday. And I think someday it's going to be in the next 4 to 5 years.
And it would be more economic, I guess. Is it fuel a big part of expenses?
Fuel's a big part of expense, but obviously, a combustion engine or a turbine engine has a high cost associated with it. Whereas, the electric engine tends to be a little bit lower cost, right? So
and
we will see.
The range.
I mean, just look at Tesla.
Yeah, range seems to be like sweet spot. I mean, the type of routes that you fly are actually the ones that seem more feasible for the type of batteries that you have now in development. So I think this Harbor Air, I think they fly from Seattle or near Seattle to Vancouver or something like that.
So they did the Seattle-Vancouver run, and they also fly, obviously from Vancouver to other locations in British Columbia and in Canada.
And they fly downtown to downtown, so that's another advantage.
Yeah, correct. They partnered with Kenmore, so they share that route with Kenmore.
So that you not only have this type of range where it's maybe too short to make it to be feasible for a larger airplane, but still too long to drive. So and in addition to that, they take you downtown to downtown. So that's pretty good proposition. Okay. Well, so hopefully we'll see. I'm definitely excited about what you're telling me, and the prospects for more to see more seaplanes around, because I think I'm a big fan of seaplanes as well. So I
Yeah,
hope
me
that
too.
that becomes true.
Yeah,
And
it's funny too. I sit here and I talk all day about seaplanes being, a viable mode of transportation and da 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 da. The reality of it is, too, honestly, Mikhail, right? They're amazing. Like, you're
yeah,
landing in the water, right? You're going from
yes,
being a plane to being a boat, and it's a unique experience. And I'm talking too much from the business side of the house, right? But from the experience, you experienced it, you didn't get the
yeah,
land in the water with us, but that's just such an amazing experience. And even when I'm riding in the back, and the minute we touch down the water, it just never gets old. And
yes,
when people experience it, they always say, "Oh, I never want to fly on a land aircraft again," because it's just something else.
yes.
And there's a joy associated with it
Yeah,
too.
and I would recommend to everyone and go check your website, and you have some really cool pictures there, I think, on social media, and where
Yeah,
they can see some really cool pictures of seaplanes in the Bahamas and other
yeah. It's
locations. So yeah,
Instagram at FlyTropic. Yeah,
yes.
and FlyTropic.com's
And,
website.
and your
Yeah.
website, can you say your website URL so
Yep.
that people can go
It's
and check it?
it's FlyTropic.com.
Great. So, well, now everyone knows, you can go check it out. And if you happen to travel to one of the areas where they operate, do not hesitate to
Yeah, please come
jump on
see
a
us.
seaplane.
Yeah,
Very good.
yeah.
Well, Rob, it's been great having you here on the podcast today. And
Yeah,
always
thank you very much. I appreciate the interest and the great conversation. So thank you for having me.
a pleasure.